duty of care that these entities can take on, where they help protect and insulate their people. They're not in violation of the law to make sure their students have access to counsel. They're not in violation of the law to alert their student body that there's been ICE presence found on campus. You know, all of these things are possible, and Columbia at every turn has chosen not to take that choice.
And before you leave, just two really fast questions. One, has anyone, any congressperson, gone to see Makled?
I actually cannot comment on that right now, but let's just say that it's on the radar. We'll put it there.
Okay. All right. We've seen what what Senator Van Hollen's visit has done. The second question is for all our listeners out there. They're wondering, how do I help? This hurts.
Yes.
How do I help? This could be me. How do I help?
Right.
What's your advice to our listeners?
Well, Attorney Jones can tell you that I have a big picture ask and a small picture ask, because we had this discussion recently. Okay. So, yes, you can call your representatives and your senators and say that you don't like what you're seeing, you know, not just what's happening with these international students, but what's happening with Mr. Abrego Garcia, with what's happening when we see the videos of people getting literally tackled, walking out of courtrooms, you know, to be taken into ICE detention, or having their car windows broken into in order to drag them out of the car, when many of these folks have never committed a crime, they're just driving to work one day, and this is what happens. And I think it's important for our representatives in both federal and state representatives to hear from us that we are not okay with this. But on a more personal level, there are a lot of people right now who are feeling very vulnerable at this moment in time, whether it be because of their own immigration status, or maybe they have a criminal record themselves and they're feeling vulnerable. Whatever the case may be, something all of us can do is we can continue to gather together. We can choose not to be afraid of each other. We can choose to do our own, pursue our own education as to what's happening now, and choose not to buy into some of the spin that's out there that's portraying and vilifying our neighbors, our community members, and choose not to engage in that vilification, and choose not to fear each other, but to continue to gather. There are small ways in our communities that we can show up and help. We can help people fill out forms that make sure that their children have a guardian just in case the worst happens. We can create sanctuary spaces in our churches and our schools. We can show support to our schools, our churches, our community centers, our universities in our local area, saying, we want to support you, we want to help protect our community. And we can keep gathering together and asking ourselves, what can we in our hyper-local area, what can we do to help to protect our neighbors and our friends, even when they don't look like you, and even when you say, I want to stay inside and stay away from all of this because it's not affecting me, it will eventually. And so now is the time all of us have to expend whatever capital we have, racial capital, financial capital, social capital, political capital, immigration capital, religious capital, whatever it is. Now is the time to draw the line in the sand within our communities and say that we're going to show up for each other. There's a movement saying, who keeps us safe? We keep us safe. We need to keep gathering and listening to each other to find out what our community needs are. So there's the big national ask, yes, make your representatives aware that you don't agree with what's happening, that you want to see something different. But on a local level, we can be gathering together and listening to each other. And that is the complete opposite of what this administration is trying to do when it tries to make us be afraid of each other and isolate and hunker down into our, into sort of our tribalism, groups. We don't want to do that. We can counter that, and we need to do it now.
Attorney Amy Greer, thank you so much for your time and being with us today on Igniting Change. Your words mean a lot. We've had the opportunity to share the stage before, and we got your back, you got our back. If you need the Transformative Justice Coalition, don't hesitate to call on us, because we'll be right there. No questions asked, we'll be right there. But we certainly want to thank you for being with us today. send our best to Mahmoud Khalil and his family to keep up the fight and stay in the struggle. And we look forward to hopefully having you back on our show again soon to give another update as to what's happening in this case.
Yes, thank you so much. And thank you, too, for Attorney Makled and his incredible advocacy for all the rest of us who are out there doing this work. Appreciate you being so public and putting yourself out there on behalf of all of us. So thanks to all of you for your incredible work. And I look forward to continuing the conversation. Thank you so much.
Grateful for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Well, Attorney Amir.
That segues really well, Barbara, because, one of the last conversations that Attorney Amy Greer and I had, we were talking about the necessity of attorneys stepping up in this moment to represent people that are in positions like Mahmoud Khalil, people that are the international exchange students that are having their rights questioned. And that just really segues well right into Attorney Amir Makled and his experience. Attorney Makled, I don't want to tell your story. I mean, you're there in Detroit, Michigan. You go on a family vacation. Can you share with us what happened?
Well, first, Daryl, I'll share my whole story, but I want to appreciate the comments from Amy and yourself as well. The lawyers right now are at the forefront of this civil rights issue. We got to be the warriors of justice. We have to be able to defend our civil rights and be at the front lines of this. And so any attorney that's out here doing this advocacy work, I applaud and I commend and I appreciate being highlighted by shows and coalitions like yours, the Transformative Justice Coalition. These are very powerful things, and we need to continue on this course. But when I get down to what happened to me, well, as you're right, I'm coming back from a family vacation with my wife and children. We went on spring break for 5 days to Punta Cana. And when I arrived in Detroit, I was detained by Customs and Border Protection for hours. And they separated me from my family. They interrogated me about my legal work. They knew about the cases that I'm currently handling, which are student protester cases from the University of Michigan. And they told me I had to unlock my phone or otherwise they would seize my phone. All of this is done without a warrant, without probable cause, without any reasonable suspicion that any criminal activity has occurred. This is it was clear to me at that point that I was being targeted because they brought up my legal work and they brought up my advocacy for Samantha Lewis.
Wow.
And tell us about Samantha Lewis.
Yes.
So Samantha's a young lady, and I appreciate the ability to elevate Samantha's situation. She's another young woman that's facing state overreach and government overreach for her role in peaceful campus protesting. Samantha stood up for human rights. Okay, she stood up with a group of individuals at an encampment at the University of Michigan. She's one of the leaders of this encampment. And instead of being protected by the Constitution, she started to become surveyed. She was followed. She was targeted, and she has now been criminally charged with a felony for resisting and opposing a police officer when Campus Safety and Ann Arbor Police Department came in wearing riot gear in full uniform with bulletproof vests, face shields, batons, and pepper spray, and stood in a line formation and walked into this encampment, busting everything that was in their way, from tents to tables to chairs, all caught on body camera footage. All very powerful images, and these students were charged for standing up to being beaten by batons. The police department gave a warning at 5:30 in the morning. This happened. Mind you, this encampment is their children. They're students. They're sleeping in these kinds of tents. 5:30 in the morning, they get a warning. You have 10 minutes to vacate. They didn't even wait the 10 minutes. They came in within 5 minutes and started busting up this encampment, and then they charged these 7 students for their protected free speech. They're advocating for BDS, boycott, divestment, and sanctions. This is something that's not a new issue. This is a movement for freedom and justice and equality on the Palestinian issue. And it's something that's been historically protested at universities across the country. But again, and this goes to the point that Amy made about universities. They can't teach advocacy in the morning and then call the police on your students in the afternoon. This is exactly what these universities are doing these days. in the historical context, universities were always the first place where people would stage an anti-war protest, and it happened in the 60s. It happened especially in Ann Arbor, in what's called the Diag, in the middle of Ann Arbor's campus. We used to have a very strong showing when students would protest against apartheid South Africa, or when the Black Lives Matter movement came to Ann Arbor. It was a strong showing from students. And this is now, we're seeing, a moral failure, and it's a constitutional one. The universities receive these public funds, and they're bound by the First Amendment, and the government is cutting off these public funds so that they could suppress the peaceful protest just because it's politically inconvenient at this point.
Wow.
But now, these students that are at the encampment, they weren't reports that, they were having like these wild parties, bothering anybody, had weapons or drugs. None of that stuff,
nothing
right?
like that. Nothing like that, not at all. This is a group of maybe 30 to 35 students who were encamped for almost 30 days. It was nearly 30 days by the time the police came in and busted up the encampment. But in that time period, you had zero threats of violence. You had zero issues of safety. You had zero issues of vandalism. You had zero issues of somebody being cited or ticketed for disrupting a class or disrupting the flow of campus norms. Nothing that was going on there. And Ann Arbor is a very big football town. The University of Michigan is known for their football games. When a Saturday afternoon football game happens, you have over 100,000 people that show up onto campus and tailgate before these afternoon games with alcohol and open flames, and it's promoted by campus safety for people to engage in this type of a party. How can they be not concerned about that, but then be concerned about 30 students in the middle of the Diag? They created this time, place, and manner issue so that they can create an excuse, a pretext, to remove these student protesters. But it's not going to stand, and it's not going to stand in our case either.
Absolutely. And, I have been in that awkward position, not yours, though, where they're questioning me as I'm trying to get back into the U.S., and they're saying, pull you aside, bring your bags up, start going through stuff, talking to you, and saying, we got a quiz for you, and then they go through everything from, who was the first president of the United States through whatever they can think of. They ask you, and all the time, eyeballing you, going through your stuff, and being mean. Going through your personal luggage. Nobody ever asked for my phone. But I remember in those moments how disorienting and evil those moments are as they're standing around you with these various guards, looking at you. And I remember, the relief when finally they realized there was nothing they could do. Fortunately for me, I had other lawyers traveling with me who were able to kind of stand aside and be watching them and making comments about their actions. You were on your own and with your family. Tell people, what that experience was like for you personally, and we'll get back to Samantha because we've got to talk more about what's going on with students. But tell us, what that was like for you, because that's no lightweight encounter.
When I first got stopped, they used an acronym. They called it the TTRT team. All right.
Wow.
And that's when I was handing my passport to the agent at the desk when you're first coming into the airport. And I didn't know what that acronym was, and I'd never been stopped at the airport. And I travel internationally every year, more than once, maybe once or twice a year, every year. So I've never been stopped, and I'm, when they used that acronym, I Googled what that acronym meant. I put TTRT and CBP, and out comes what the acronym is: Tactical Terrorism Response Team. I said, oh, my gosh, what is this nonsense? And so my heart starts to, pump fast. I'm getting nervous. I look over at my wife. I tell her they're going to pull us in. They're going to pull me in for questioning. She goes, why would they do that? I said, I have no idea, but that's what's getting ready to happen. So she gathers up the girls. I got my two daughters are traveling with us. And they lead me into a interrogation room. And really this room is something like you would believe like a